Hello and welcome. Thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Huguenot Street's weekly program on WFNP The Edge, where we discuss local history, historic preservation, and education. I'm Kaitlin Gallucci, and I'm the communications manager at Huguenot Street. I am sad to say that this is our last show of the semester, but there are plenty of ways you can keep up with us over the summer. For one thing, you can sign up for our email list on huguenotstreet.org to receive our periodic emails about upcoming events. You can also like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Huguenot Street or follow us on Twitter or Instagram, where our username is also Huguenot Street. Tonight, I'll be speaking with Kara Gaffken, Huguenot Street's Director of Public Programming. Hi, Kara.
Hi, Caitlin.
You may remember Kara from our first show last month. Tonight, we'll be discussing the exciting changes at Huguenot Street launching on opening day next Saturday, May 7th. So, Kara, can you begin by reminding our listeners, for those who may have missed our first show, what it is you do at Huguenot Street as the Director of Public Programming?
Sure. So as the Director of Public Programming, I'm basically responsible for all events that involve the general public and are geared towards the general public. So that could be anything from an educational lecture to a school group tour to a concert and even like a cool historic beer tasting or something fun like that.
Right. So, first of all, how can people take the tours on Huguenot Street?
Great question. So, as you already said, we officially open to the public on Saturday, May 7th. So, from May through October this year, we will be open 6 days a week. The only day that will be closed is actually on Wednesdays. And our visitor center will be open from 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m.
Okay. And what types of things can people expect to see on a tour?
Well, the tours last about an hour and a half, and they actually will go out every hour on the hour. So when we do open up the first tour of the day, will go out at 10 a.m., and then the last tour of the day will go out at 4 o'clock. But like I said, lasts an hour and a half. And in that time, guests get to see 4 of our buildings. So, well, actually 5 if you consider the visitor center, which is also
that's right.
a historic house, the Du Bois Fort. So the tours start at the Du Bois Fort, then visitors get to see the Bevere Elting homestead, then they go to the 1717 reconstructed First Stone Church, then over to the Jean Hasbrouck house, and then to the Deo House. And that's something that is actually new to this year's tours, the fact that you get to see so many houses in one visit. So we're really, really excited about that.
Cool. So there's actually a lot of ways that these year's tours are different from last year's. Is that correct?
Yes, definitely.
So can you tell us about some of the ways that the tours have changed?
Yeah, absolutely. So as of last fall, we actually started partnering with Bill Weldon, who is the former director of the Revolutionary City at Colonial Williamsburg and also the former director of the Cultural Interpretation and Living History section of the National Association of Interpretation. Really long name.
Wow, yeah.
He's a really great guy.
But he is like so impressive. He's really cool.
He's incredibly
and really
impressive. Yeah, absolutely. So he has been working with us to prepare for and really revamp the tours for the 2016 season. So he comes from a fantastic background, a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, and so he's really just assisting us in really propelling our tours forward in terms of being innovative in the historic museum field.
Great. So what are some of the new things that people will learn on this year's tours?
Sure. So I think something that's really important and significant about the changes on this year's tours is our focus on the Native American experience on the street, which was only previously briefly touched on the tours. And
Right.
in addition to that, our focus on the history of slavery on the street, which also was just sort of sprinkled in here and there. With these new tours, you get a much more well-rounded and sort of in-depth focus on the history of slavery, and not just on the street, but in the Hudson Valley in general.
Right.
And both of those topics, you come to right off the bat. So the first house that you visit, which, as I said, is the Bevere Elting House. And the reason that we talk about those things in the first house is because these topics and these peoples really sort of lay the foundation for the rest of the tour that you're going to experience. So we start with, what existed here on the street before the Huguenots got here. And that, of course, is the Native Americans. And so we talk about how these were the Lenni Lenape people, and they had lived here for over 8,000 years before any Europeans got to this, what they considered the New World, right? So they would have lived all throughout this sort of territory that we consider New Paltz today and beyond. And they would have built things like longhouses and wigwams. They would have had subsistence agriculture. We think about Europeans coming to this, what we would consider like a virgin wilderness, and that's really not the case. This landscape was really molded by the Native Americans before the Europeans got here. They would, grow maize, and that's corn and beans and squash, and they knew that you could only farm land for a certain amount of time, and then the soil wouldn't be as nutrient rich, so then they would pick up and move to another location, and they would farm that. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of the landscape being changed by them.
And we know a lot about their existence in the area prior to the European settlement because of a lot of the archaeology that's been done on the street, correct?
Yes, definitely. So we have the SUNY New Paltz Anthropology Department do archaeological excavations on the site every single summer, and that's with Professor Joe Diamond, who we absolutely adore. So he comes out in the summer with a group of, I want to say at least a dozen students.
That sounds right.
Yeah, and they literally dig in the dirt for about a month. I mean, how much more fun can that be, right? And they find the most amazing artifacts, everything from historic artifacts, pieces of Victorian china, coins from the Revolutionary period and things like that, but also those prehistoric things that do shed light on the Native American existence in the area. So prehistoric pottery and things like that, mortars and pestle and other spear points and really awesome artifacts. So we know that the Native Americans were literally living and inhabiting Huguenot Street because we have these artifacts, which is so cool.
This isn't an assumption. We've literally seen like their houses and like their footprints.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's evidence of likely a longhouse existing very close to the Du Bois Fort. So how cool is that?
Right.
So like I said, we cover the Native American experience. And then from there, we're really talking about how the community evolved. So in 1677, the Huguenots met with the Native Americans in what we now know as New Paltz, and they made a written agreement that said the Native Americans will give the Huguenots 40,000 acres of land in exchange for things like shirts and stockings, bars of lead. I believe there's like 2 horses on the list, wampum, and items like that. And the sort of sad part is that after that 1677 land agreement, we have no other evidence of Native Americans having relations with the Huguenots. It's as if they kind of disappeared. Not from the area, because there is evidence of Native Americans having relations and trading with settlers in Kingston and Hurley up through the early 18th century. But
okay.
but within New Paltz specifically, it just we don't have any more documentation that they were around.
Right.
But once the Huguenots, purchased, you can say, the land here, they built earth-fast houses. So these were temporary homes, and we talk about how they built that a little bit, and again, the archaeological evidence that we have for those houses. This is not something that we're just assuming they did.
Yeah.
We know that because of Professor Joe Diamond and the wonderful students that we had an earth-fast house on Huguenot Street.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think is cool and that people don't really necessarily realize, but I learned from being at Huguenot Street, which is that those stone houses weren't necessarily the first houses. There were
not at all.
original structures that are not still standing today, and thanks to the archaeological field work, we know that they were there, and we know where they were.
Exactly, yeah, which is so cool. I mean, how many historic sites can really say that? I think it's really, it makes us stand out.
Yeah.
So we talk about how the Huguenots went from having these sort of less permanent structures to eventually prospering so much through the farming that they were doing that they were able to build their permanent stone homes. And another reason that they prospered was the fact that they were slave owners and they were using slave labor very often. And because of tax records and last will and testaments and things like that, we can see how many enslaved people the Huguenots owned in the early settlement. And it looks like every single one of them did. But in smaller numbers. A lot of people think, a slave-owning family, they immediately think of this southern plantation with hundreds and hundreds of slaves, right? It's looking like the Huguenots that settled New Paltz really had about 1 to 4 at most. For instance, in 1709, Louis Bevere was taxed for 2 adult slaves. He was also taxed for 1 chimney and 1 stove in 1709, as a matter of fact. But that's how we know this information. And we talk about the slave story actually through the narrative of Sojourner Truth, because as many people know, she was born in the area. She was enslaved in the New Paltz patent. And she is one of the only firsthand accounts that we have of a locally enslaved individual.
Right.
Slaves weren't really keeping diaries or journals. Many were honestly illiterate. So we don't have those primary documents. And so what we do is we look at her experience and say, because she lived so closely and in the area, her experience and the circumstances that she was dealing with is likely very similar to those that the individuals who were enslaved on Huguenot Street were experiencing.
That makes sense.
As well. So like I said, the sort of information really sort of lays the foundation for the remainder of the tour. So from the Bevere Elting House, we go over to the 1717 church, which is actually a reconstruction. Our quote-unquote 1717 First Stone Church was actually built in the early 1970s. And that's because when the Huguenots community grew and the stone church that they built in 1717 became too small to hold everyone, they actually dismantled that first church and they used the stones to lay the foundation for the second stone church, which they built down the street. But it was very important to the organization that there was some sort of representation of that church on the street, so that's why it was erected.
Right.
In the 1970s. But it's in the church where you're really going to get a good picture of the Huguenots' beliefs and really what was going on in France and why they left and the reason even for them separating themselves from the Dutch in Kingston and wanting to have their own community and things like that. And how did they practice their faith once they got to New Paltz? So that's the church. And then the Jean Hasbrouck house, we were really following the lives and the significance of the 3 generations that followed Jean Hasbrouck, the patentee. So a lot of people in the New Paltz area probably recognize the name Jean Hasbrouck. The Jean Hasbrouck house is one of the more iconic houses on the street. It's right behind the monument. But he, believe it or not, actually didn't build that house. It was his son, Jacob Sr., who built that home. So we talk about Jacob Sr. We talk about Jacob Sr.'s son, Jacob Jr., not to get confusing. And then we talk about Jacob Jr.'s son, Josiah Hasbrouck. And we talk about how these three generations actually played a part in some really major historical moments that, were very significant in American history. So one being the French and Indian War, and another being the American Revolution, and then the third actually being the purchase of the Louisiana Purchase. So Josiah Hasbrouck, the fourth generation Hasbrouck on the street, he actually was elected to Congress and served from 1803 to 1805. And he was a part of the vote that basically said, we're going to purchase all of this land and gosh, probably more than double the territory that, was the United States at the time.
Yeah.
So major player. He was the first actually Huguenot descendant to be elected to Congress. So he's very special in our streets history.
I think that's really cool to tell those stories because I think,
yes.
Not everybody may know Josiah's name. He's no George Washington, but
sure.
he and his ancestors were still right there during these moments in history as well. Right.
And that's, you literally said exactly, one of the major points that we try to get across in our tours is that Huguenot Street, even though, it's not colonial Williamsburg, it's not really one of these super recognizable historic sites yet. That's good. Our history and our descendants played a little bit of a part in almost every significant historical event in American history, and that's so neat. And our dear friend A.J. Shankman once said that Huguenot Street is the Forrest Gump of historic sites. And it played a part in every significant historic event, right? So the final house on the tour is the Deo House, which totally in comparison to Jean, it actually shoots you 100 years into the future. So you leave the Jean Hasbrouck house and you're in the early 1800s, late 1700s, and you go over to the Deo House and all of a sudden it's 1890. And it's the colonial revival, and it's, we're past the Victorian era, but you still sort of have these very proper ideals and things like that, and it's really changing society. And people are reflecting on their past, and they're very nostalgic for this sort of early republic, and you see a lot of this nostalgia being reflected in the decorative arts, and you see a lot of really well-known societies today, genealogical societies and preservation societies and things like that, actually popping up in the 1890s and the early 20th century. So the Sons of the American Revolution pop up. Right. And, of course, that was an all-male society. So a year later, the Daughters of the American Revolution pop up. And that same sort of... those same sort of patterns are also reflected in this very town. So the New Paltz, oh God, let me see if I can get this right. The New Paltz Patriotic, Historical, and Monumental Society. I probably messed that up.
Something like that.
Something like that.
I think it might have memorial in
it. So today it's, Huguenot Street. But we were founded in 1899. And for the same reasons, people were nostalgic for the past and wanted to preserve our stories. And that's what we're doing today.
Great. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Kara.
Folks, why won't we go to the doctor? My uncle called, speech all slurred, complaining his arms numb. He called everyone. He even called my daughter Tiara, because, she's got a year of nursing. Everyone thinks he needs to go to the doctor, including me. So he said, well, will you take me? I'm like, I'm on the road. He goes, I'll wait. Stroke's no joke. Dial 911. Time loss is brain loss. Seriously, dial 911.
Visit strokesnojoke.org, brought to you by the American Stroke Association and the Ad Council.
There once was a boy wizard whose name was Larry Smarter.
Larry, why weren't you in Professor Dinky Doodle's mythical creature classification class?
Well, I'm taking Algebra 2 in a foreign language.
Oh, so you can talk to unicorns?
Not exactly, unless they're French.
Larry wanted to go to college, so he visited knowhowtogo.org to find the classes he really needed. Getting into college doesn't happen magically. Learn more at knowhowtogo.org.
Brought to you by the American Council on Education, Lumina Foundation for Education, and the Ad Council.
Hi, welcome back. You're listening to WFNP The Edge. I'm Kaitlin Gallucci, and I'm speaking to Huguenot Street's Director of Public Programming, Kara Gaffken. So just before the break, Kara was telling us all about the new tours at Historic Huguenot Street. I'd like to remind you, those tours are launching next Saturday, May 7th, and will be available hourly beginning at 10 a.m., with the last tour going out at 4 p.m. And also starting May 7th, Huguenot Street will be open for those tours 6 days a week, every day except Wednesdays. And you can find more information on our website at huguenotstreet.org. Opening day will also feature a special meet and greet with the Beekman boys of the Beekman 1802 farm in Sharon Springs, New York. We love the Beekman boys. And they'll be on Huguenot Street from 2 to 3 p.m. to chat about life on the farm and their artisan mercantile goods. And Josh and Brent will sign books as guests enjoy wine and a wine and cheese reception. The museum shop carries a variety of Beekman 1802 local bath and body goods, and guests will receive 10% off Beekman 1802 items for that one day only on opening day, May 7th. And to kind of continue celebrating this cool rural farm lifestyle, we're really lucky. We're going to have some local sheep and lambs visiting us on opening day. Is that right?
Yeah, we're very excited about this. I mean, for one, to have the Beekman boys on site
Totally.
is incredibly amazing, and I'm so excited. I'm just going to stock up on all my Beekman products that day.
Yeah. Christine was just telling me there's a lot of new stuff now.
Yes, there are. Our sales and tours manager, who is also responsible for all the inventory in our museum gift shop, she has been going crazy buying up all the most amazing and new products. So we actually have a wonderful volunteer who raises sheep, and they're planning on bringing some of their sheep and lambs for a petting zoo, and I'm so excited.
That'll be so sweet. That'll go really well with everything else going on that day.
Yeah, definitely.
So I do want to take just a minute to talk a little bit more about the museum shop at Huguenot Street. For those who don't know, the museum shop is more than just a shop for Huguenot Street souvenirs. It also carries a whole host of local artisan home and lifestyle products, and we love to support local businesses. Beekman 1802 is a perfect example. Many of the museum shop's products are also available on our online shop at huguenotstreet.org/shop. And of course, all proceeds support Huguenot Street and its preservation and education efforts. Something new, other than Beekman 1802, we just started carrying seed packs from the Hudson Valley Seed Library. We currently have 20 seed varieties available, and they're certified organic from the Seed Library's small farm in Accord. And every seed pack features contemporary artwork, most often by a regional local artist. Because we also love to support local artists. One artist whose work is often available in the museum shop is painter Kevin Cook. He's a Huguenot Street resident who we love very much.
Love Kevin Cook.
And he's also one of our volunteer interpreters. Kevin is an accomplished landscape painter whose style is strongly influenced by the Hudson River School artists of the 19th century. The museum shop carries prints of Kevin's work, as well as note cards featuring his watercolor paintings of the historic houses. So obviously, I mean, Kevin is a very important part of Huguenot Street.
So important. I hope he's listening. We love you, Kevin.
I do too. Well, we'll send him a link.
Yeah.
So, Kara, you work with Kevin on one of our annual signature events, correct?
I do. So that's Artists on the Street. And this is really Kevin's baby. This was totally his idea. This year on, it's going to be Saturday, August 13th. It's always the second Saturday in August. This is going to be our 4th annual. So he came up with this
That's awesome.
4 years ago. And last year we had over 20 artists come out and participate. And what they do is they come out to Huguenot Street and they just set up their easel and art supplies. And they just choose a house or a landscape or whatever they want, really, and they paint. And it's a free event. People can walk up and down the street. You can approach the artists. They're happy to answer your questions and talk about the sort of artistic process that they go through. But it's a really fun, family-friendly event. We have never had bad weather for this event, knock on wood.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I just keep requesting that sunshine and Mother Earth keeps providing.
That's really lucky, yeah.
So I can assure you that it'll be nice weather again this year. We love Artists on the Street. Very
Definitely.
exciting.
So in addition to Artists on the Street, you've obviously organized a number of great upcoming events this year. Can you tell us a bit more about what's coming up next?
Sure. So specifically for summer events, a lot of great stuff going on. I'll just briefly highlight we're going to be having our 2nd annual hard cider market and tasting on Saturday, June 11th. So this was a sort of test thing that we did last year. We weren't really sure what sort of response we were going to get from the community. We weren't sure if people were going to be interested in. It absolutely poured. We had horrible weather, and a ton of people came out and had a great time.
Yeah.
So this year we already have Aaron Burr Cidery signed up. We have Awestruck signed up, Brooklyn Cider House, Doc's Hard Cider, Ninepin Cider, and the list keeps growing.
Awesome.
So everyone, please come out to that. Totally fun. Super cheap, $10 ticket, all you can drink cider, and then you can literally test every cider at the market and then go around and purchase your favorites. So
Yes.
that's a good one. And then Saturday, July 2nd, we'll be having our New Paltz in the War of Independence program, which we also did last year. Last year it was just a very small reenactment event, and this year it's going to be much bigger. So we have members of the 5th New York Regiment who are going to be on site. We'll be doing a reenactment of Revolutionary encampment with a blacksmith and all, and they'll be doing a musket demonstration and candle making demos, and it's gonna be a great time. We're really excited for it. And again, I promise I've requested fabulous weather for all of these, so
Yeah.
so don't worry about the rain.
I think you deserve it.
Good.
And a really cool thing is that all of these events at Huguenot Street aren't just for history buffs.
No.
Of course, all these events are mission-based and appropriate and, scholarly, accurate, but they are suitable for anyone from historians to people who just have an interest in local history or people who just like cider.
Yeah, people just like cider. And you know what? What's really fun is cider has such a historical significance in the Hudson Valley, and we have a ton of evidence of our Huguenots making and selling cider, so
Oh, you're right.
that's where it plays into our history specifically, and we like to honor it by drinking cider.
Exactly. in their honor.
What better way? Yeah, in their honor.
Definitely. All right, so there's a lot to look forward to.
Definitely.
So we're wrapping up now, but again, there are plenty of ways you can keep up with us over the summer and, make sure you don't miss any of these great events. You can sign up for our email list at huguenotstreet.org to receive our emails about upcoming events. You can also search for us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter or Instagram, where our username is Huguenot Street. You can also follow our friend Archie the Archives Bat, whose handle is Archie_HHS. And if you're a fan of the museum shop and want to know what's there, you can also like the museum shop on Facebook at facebook.com/Historic Huguenot Street Museum Shop, one word. You can also keep up with the Object of the Week blog at hhscollections.wordpress.com, and the word collections is plural. And do mark your calendars. We've said it a lot, but for Saturday, May 7th, when, as discussed, we'll celebrate this year's opening with brand new tours and a special appearance by the Beekman Boys. You can register for that meet and greet at huguenotstreet.org/RSVP. We will see you then, and we will talk to you again in the fall. Thanks for listening.
WFNP.